There's a hidden language of history, one not written in grand battles or famous speeches, but etched into the quiet, unassuming tools that civilizations left behind. These objects, often overlooked in dusty museum corners or buried beneath centuries of soil, hold secrets far more powerful than their humble appearances suggest. Picture this, a simple wooden plow, its blade worn smooth by generations of hands, feeding an empire's armies, or a bronze compass, no larger than a palm, guiding explorers to uncharted lands. These weren't just tools, they were silent architects of destiny, shaping the rise and fall of empires without a single line in the history books. What if I told you that some of the most transformative inventions of antiquity weren't the ones glorified in legends, but the ones tucked into the daily lives of farmers, builders, and craftsmen? From the water-powered mills that fueled Rome's breadbasket to the intricate seed drills of ancient China that fed millions, these tools were the unsung heroes of progress. They didn't just make life easier, they made civilization possible. Yet, for every famous invention like the wheel or the printing press, there are dozens of these forgotten marvels, their stories fading like whispers in the wind. How did something as ordinary as a fishing net or a clay pot become the invisible backbone of an empire? That's the mystery we're unraveling today. We're digging deep into the archives of time to resurrect 38 of these obscure tools, each with a tale more fascinating than the last. You'll discover how a humble sickle changed the course of agriculture, why a peculiar-looking Roman chisel was the key to their architectural wonders, and how a delicate balanced scale from Mesopotamia laid the groundwork for modern trade. This isn't just a list, it's a journey into the ingenuity of our ancestors, a testament to human creativity that thrived in the shadows. By the time we're done, you'll never look at history the same way again. So let's step into the workshop of the past, where every tool has a story, and every story changed the world. The Roman Groma might look like a child's toy today, just a cross-shaped frame with weighted strings dangling from each arm. But in the hands of a Roman surveyor, it was the key to building an empire. Picture a team of engineers standing in an untamed wilderness, turning this simple device until the plumb lines aligned perfectly with the horizon. Suddenly, the chaos of nature bowed to order. Roads stretched arrow straight for thousands of miles, aqueducts climbed hills with mathematical precision, and military camps emerged as symmetrical fortresses overnight. This was no accident. Rome's legendary infrastructure, the very skeleton of its power, depended on the Groma's unerring accuracy. What's astonishing isn't just the tool itself, but the ambition it represented. While other civilizations relied on rough estimations, Roman surveyors used the Groma to carve grids across 3 continents, every mile marked by milestones, every intersection perfectly angled. Those iconic roads, they weren't just dirt paths. Layers of gravel, sand, and stone were packed so meticulously that some still survive today, 2,000 years later. And it wasn't just about getting from point A to point B. Straight roads meant faster armies, efficient trade, and a unified empire where news could travel faster than anywhere else in the ancient world. But here's the twist: the Groma's real genius lay in its simplicity. Unlike delicate instruments that required elite training, this tool was democratic. A junior surveyor could master it in weeks, which meant Rome could scale its engineering feats at an unprecedented pace. That's how you build a civilization, not just with grand ideas, but with tools so reliable and accessible that they become invisible. And yet, without the Groma's silent precision, the Roman Empire might have remained a flicker in history rather than a flame that lit the world. Now, let's shift from the orderly lines of Rome to the unpredictable rhythms of the earth. Because while the Groma shaped empires above ground, our next tool worked its magic beneath the surface, turning barren soil into breadbaskets, one seed at a time. While Roman engineers were mastering straight lines with their Groma, an even older civilization was solving a far more urgent problem: how to turn desert into farmland. Enter the Egyptian Shaduff, a deceptively simple tool that might just be one of history's most underrated inventions. Imagine standing on the banks of the Nile 3,000 years ago, watching a farmer lower a bucket into the river with nothing but a long pole, a counterweight, and sheer ingenuity. With one smooth motion, he'd hoist water high above the riverbank, pouring it into channels that snaked through sun-baked fields. This wasn't just irrigation, it was alchemy, transforming sand into gold, or rather wheat, barley, and flax that built a kingdom. The Shaduff's brilliance was in its economy of motion. Unlike back-breaking methods of hauling water by hand, this lever system multiplied human effort tenfold. A single farmer could irrigate an acre a day, turning the Nile's seasonal floods into a year-round lifeline. And here's what's astonishing: those same principles power modern wells in rural communities today. The Shaduff didn't just feed ancient Egypt. Its DNA lives on in every hand pump and counterweight system still used across the globe. But the real magic wasn't just in the tool itself. It was how this unassuming device became the backbone of an empire. With reliable harvests, Egypt could stockpile grain, freeing up labor for everything from pyramid building to military campaigns. The Shaduff didn't just water crops, it watered civilization itself, allowing art, science, and government to flourish in what should have been barren land. And yet, you won't find it glittering in Tutankhamun's tomb or carved into temple walls. True revolutions often hide in plain sight, disguised as everyday tools. Now, let's trade the rhythmic splash of the Shaduff for the ringing clang of metal on stone. Because while Egypt's farmers were harnessing water, another ancient culture was perfecting a tool that would literally shape mountains, one precise strike at a time. High above the sun-baked hills of ancient Greece, workers strained against ropes, their muscles trembling as massive stone blocks inched skyward. This wasn't brute strength at work, it was the genius of the Greek crane, a symphony of wooden beams, hemp ropes, and bronze pulleys that turned impossible weights into architectural triumphs. Imagine standing at the foot of the Parthenon's construction site, watching a single team hoist a 20-ton marble column into place with nothing but clever engineering and coordinated effort. While Egypt relied on ramps and Rome on manpower, the Greeks cracked the code of vertical lift, changing architecture forever. What made this crane revolutionary wasn't just its ability to lift, but its efficiency. Earlier civilizations dragged stones up earthen ramps, a process so labor-intensive it required thousands of workers. The Greek crane reduced that workforce by 90%. A single operator could rotate a wooden winch, threading ropes through pulley systems that multiplied force like magic. This wasn't just about building taller, it was about building smarter. Temples rose faster with finer details because artisans weren't exhausted by hauling materials. And when the Romans adopted the design, they scaled it up, using cranes to stack the Colosseum's massive arches like children's blocks. Yet here's the twist: the Greek crane's legacy isn't just in the monuments it left behind. Its principles live on in every construction site today. Those same pulley systems now lift steel beams for skyscrapers, and the winch mechanism evolved into modern hoists. But unlike the Parthenon's gleaming columns, the crane itself faded into obscurity. No grand statues honor the anonymous engineer who first tied rope to a rotating drum. Perhaps that's the fate of truly transformative tools. They become so fundamental we forget they were ever invented. Now, let's descend from the heights of Greek engineering to the shadows of ancient battlefields, where our next tool didn't lift stones, it shattered shields and rewrote the rules of war. While Greek engineers were perfecting the crane halfway across the world, Chinese artisans were crafting a weapon so revolutionary it would alter the balance of power, the Zhuge Nu or repeating crossbow. Picture a Qin dynasty soldier on the battlefield, his hands moving in a blur as bolt after bolt screamed toward enemy lines at astonishing speed. Unlike traditional crossbows that required agonizing seconds to reload, this ingenious device held a magazine of up to 10 bolts, firing them as fast as the operator could work its lever. In the time it took an archer to notch a single arrow, a Zhuge Nu wielder could unleash a deadly hailstorm of projectiles, turning the tide of battles that shaped ancient China's destiny. What made this weapon extraordinary wasn't just its firepower, but its accessibility. Crafted from wood and bronze with minimal moving parts, even conscripted farmers could master it with minimal training. When the Qin emperor needed to unify warring states, the Zhuge Nu became his great equalizer. Swarms of these weapons, neutralizing elite cavalry and armored infantry alike. Historians credit its rapid deployment as a key factor in China's first imperial unification, proving that innovation often triumphs over brute strength. Yet for all its battlefield glory, the repeating crossbow nearly vanished from history once peace arrived. Without wars to fuel its production, knowledge of its mechanisms faded into obscurity, surviving only in scattered manuscripts until modern historians painstakingly reconstructed its design. The Zhuge Nu story mirrors a paradox of military technology. Tools that change the world are often discarded once their purpose is served. But while this crossbow's legacy faded, another ancient invention was quietly ensuring empires wouldn't starve long enough to wage wars in the first place. From rapid death to sustained life, our next tool didn't conquer lands, it conquered hunger itself. Long before tractors plowed fields or combines harvested grain, an ingenious invention was quietly fueling the world's first cities, the Mesopotamian seed drill. Picture a farmer in the Fertile Crescent 4,000 years ago, guiding a wooden contraption pulled by oxen. As its teeth carved neat furrows, seeds trickled from a hopper above, each one landing at the perfect depth and spacing. This wasn't just planting, it was precision agriculture centuries ahead of its time. While most ancient societies scattered seeds by hand, wasting precious grain to birds or uneven growth, Mesopotamians turned sowing into a science. Their fields yielded bumper crops that fed Ur's towering ziggurats and Babylon's bustling markets, laying the foundation for urban civilization itself. What's staggering isn't just the seed drill's efficiency, but how its principles vanished for ages. After Mesopotamia's decline, the technology disappeared from records until 18th century Europe reinvented it nearly word for word. Historians still debate whether Jethro Tull, the British agriculturist credited with the modern seed drill, drew inspiration from rediscovered cuneiform tablets or arrived at the same solution independently. Either way, the lesson is clear. Ancient innovations were often lost not because they failed, but because knowledge wasn't preserved across generations. Imagine how farming, and by extension, human history, might have accelerated if this tool's blueprint had survived intact. Yet the seed drill's true legacy isn't just in the bread it put on tables. By freeing farmers from backbreaking labor, it allowed specialization to flourish. With reliable harvests, not everyone had to work the land. Artisans could craft, merchants could trade, and scribes could record civilization's first dominoes tipping toward progress. All thanks to a humble wooden device that ensured every seed had its place. Now, let's turn from the orderly rows of Mesopotamian fields to the molten glow of ancient forges, where another breakthrough was taking shape, one that would transform not just crops, but the very fabric of society. Because while farmers were mastering the earth, metalworkers were unlocking the secrets of fire and ore. The Viking Ulfbert sword wasn't just a weapon, it was a technological marvel that defied its time. Picture a Norse warrior gripping its gleaming blade in the 10th century, the metal so pure it bent without breaking, held an edge sharper than any rival, and felt unnaturally light in battle. While most European swords of the era were brittle iron prone to shattering, the Ulfbert contained steel so advanced it wouldn't be matched until the Industrial Revolution, 800 years later. Its secret crucible steel, a material forged at temperatures so high it burned away impurities, creating a near-perfect molecular structure. Archaeologists still debate how Viking smiths achieved such heats without modern furnaces, or why this knowledge vanished like smoke from a forge. What makes the Ulfbert truly extraordinary isn't just its composition, but its mystique. Each blade bore the name Ulfbert inlaid in iron letters, a maker's mark so trusted it became medieval Europe's first brand name. Warriors across Scandinavia and beyond would pay fortunes for these swords, believing they carried supernatural strength. Some even appear in sagas as heirlooms passed down generations, their durability defying time itself. Yet by the 12th century, no one could replicate them. The recipe was lost, leaving later swords inferior until the age of blast furnaces. The Ulfbert's disappearance poses a haunting question. How could such revolutionary technology simply fade away? Some historians blame the collapse of trade routes that brought crucible steel from the Middle East. Others suggest guilds guarded their secrets too closely, taking techniques to the grave. Whatever the cause, the lesson is clear: progress isn't inevitable. Even the mightiest innovations can vanish if knowledge isn't shared. Now, let's sail from the frozen north to the sun-baked deserts where another tool didn't just change warfare, but rewrote the rules of commerce itself. Because while Vikings prized their swords, merchants across the ancient world measured wealth with a far simpler instrument, one that balanced kingdoms as deftly as it weighed gold. While Viking swordsmiths were perfecting their steel, Phoenician sailors were mastering an entirely different kind of precision: navigation by the stars. Enter the astrolabe, a bronze disc no larger than a dinner plate that became the ancient world's most sophisticated handheld computer. Picture a merchant captain standing on the deck of his ship at midnight, lifting this intricate device to align its sights with Polaris, the North Star. As the weighted dial rotated, engraved markings revealed his latitude with astonishing accuracy, guiding him safely past treacherous coastlines and into bustling ports from Tyre to Carthage. In an era when most sailors clung to shorelines like lifelines, the Phoenician Astrolabe turned open water into a highway, and its creators into the Mediterranean's undisputed trading kings. What set this tool apart wasn't just its celestial calculations, but its versatility. By day, sailors could use it to measure the sun's angle. By night, it mapped constellations. Some advanced models even included interchangeable plates for different latitudes, effectively serving as adjustable maps of the heavens. This wasn't just a navigational aid, it was a portable observatory that compressed generations of astronomical knowledge into a single, rugged instrument. And the impact was staggering. Phoenician traders, armed with astrolabes, established routes stretching from Britain's tin mines to Egypt's grain stores, weaving together the ancient world's first truly global economy. Yet the astrolabe story carries a poignant twist. As Phoenicia's maritime dominance waned, so too did the expertise needed to craft and use these devices. Later versions became overly ornate, their precision sacrificed for decoration, a metaphor for how practical knowledge fades when its purpose is forgotten. By the time medieval Arab astronomers revived the astrolabe's design, the Phoenician star-honed secrets were already lost to time. Now, let's leave the rolling waves behind for a tool that transformed not trade routes, but something far more intimate, the rhythm of daily life in every home, from peasant huts to royal palaces. Because while sailors were charting courses by the stars, another invention was quietly measuring time itself, turning chaos into order with every steady tick. Beneath the marble floors of a Roman villa, something remarkable was happening, an invisible revolution in comfort. The Hypocaust, Rome's ingenious underfloor heating system, turned winter into summer with nothing but hot air and engineering brilliance. Picture this: slaves stoked furnaces in basement chambers, sending warmth snaking through a labyrinth of hollow tiles beneath the floors. Walls, too, were threaded with clay pipes, turning entire rooms into radiant ovens. This wasn't just luxury, it was climate control perfected 2,000 years before central heating. While northern tribes shivered in drafty huts, Roman aristocrats lounged in togas year-round, their bare feet warmed by technology so advanced it wouldn't be matched until the 19th century. The Hypocaust's genius lay in its simplicity. By elevating floors on stacks of brick pillars, engineers created space for heated air to circulate, a principle still used in modern radiant heating. Public bathhouses took it further, with hypocausts so vast they heated pools the size of swimming halls. The remains of these systems still astonish archaeologists. In some villas, the underfloor channels stretch for miles, a hidden infrastructure rivaling the aqueducts in complexity. Yet what's most striking isn't the engineering, but the philosophy behind it. Rome didn't reserve this technology for emperors. Even modest towns boasted public baths with hypocausts, a testament to a society that viewed comfort as a communal right. So why did this marvel vanish with Rome's fall? The answer is as much about economics as engineering. Hypocausts required armies of slaves to maintain furnaces and an empire's wealth to fuel them. As Rome crumbled, so did the systems that sustained such extravagance. Medieval Europeans, lacking both resources and knowledge, reverted to smoky hearths, forgetting the hypocaust lessons for 1,000 years. Its legacy, though, lingers in the tiles beneath your feet next time you step onto a heated bathroom floor. You're walking in the footsteps of Roman innovators. Now, let's trade the warmth of villas for the quiet urgency of ancient sick rooms, where another tool didn't just comfort bodies, it saved them. Because while Romans mastered heating, Greek physicians were perfecting an instrument that would become the symbol of medicine itself. In the dim light of an ancient Greek healing temple, a physician steadied his hand over a patient's swollen abdomen. His tool, a bronze scalpel so finely honed its edge could split a human hair. This wasn't crude bloodletting, it was precision surgery centuries ahead of its time. Hippocratic doctors wielded these blades to perform delicate procedures we'd recognize today, removing tumors, draining abscesses, even repairing hernias. Their scalpels, often decorated with intricate designs, were more than instruments. They were symbols of a medical revolution that valued observation over superstition. While other cultures attributed disease to angry gods, Greek surgeons mapped the body's anatomy with tools that wouldn't look out of place in a modern operating room. What's astonishing isn't just the scalpels themselves, but the knowledge behind them. Surviving medical texts describe techniques for minimizing infection, boiling instruments, using vinegar washes that predate germ theory by 2 millennia. Archaeologists have unearthed scalpels with interchangeable blades, some curved for intricate work, others hooked for suturing. This modular design hints at a sophistication we rarely associate with ancient medicine. Yet for all their skill, Greek surgeons faced a brutal limitation: no anesthesia. Patients bit down on leather straps as these razor-sharp tools carved into living flesh, a testament to both human endurance and the desperate trust placed in healers' hands. The legacy of these bronze blades stretches far beyond antiquity. Modern surgical steel may be sharper, but the principles Greek physicians established: clean incisions, anatomical precision, systematic aftercare, remain the bedrock of surgery today. It's a humbling reminder that some innovations aren't just about materials, but ideas. The next time you see a surgeon's scalpel, remember, its true cutting edge was forged not in a factory, but in the minds of healers who dared to believe the body could be understood, not just feared. Now, let's shift from the quiet intensity of the operating room to the bustling streets of ancient empires, where our next tool didn't mend flesh, it connected minds across continents. Because while Greek scalpels were healing bodies, another invention was stitching together the very fabric of human communication. High in the Andes, where paper never existed and writing remained unknown, the Inca Empire wove its bureaucracy from colored threads and intricate knots. The Quipu wasn't just a tool, it was the nervous system of the largest pre-Columbian civilization, a tactile language of numbers and meaning that could record everything from grain stocks to astronomical cycles. Picture a royal administrator running his fingers along a cascade of pendant cords, each knot's position and type representing precise quantities. A figure 8 knot for tens, a long knot with varying turns for hundreds, the colors of the strings denoting subjects like corn, gold, or population. This was mathematics made physical, a binary code in yarn that allowed the Inca to govern an empire stretching 2,000 miles without a single written word. What terrified Spanish conquistadors wasn't the Quipu's complexity, but its efficiency. When invaders demanded tribute, Inca officials could instantly produce exact records of every village's resources, proof that this primitive system outperformed Europe's parchment scrolls and ledger books. Some Quipus even tracked time itself, with knots marking celestial events to coordinate planting and festivals across mountainous terrain. But herein lay the tragedy. The Spanish, recognizing the Quipu's power as a tool of resistance, ordered their destruction. Thousands were burned as relics of paganism, severing the threads of Inca memory in a single generation. Only about 600 survive today, their full meanings still debated by scholars trying to crack history's most enigmatic spreadsheet. Yet the Quipu's legacy whispers through modern technology. Like computer code translating information into ones and zeros, these knotted cords prove that data doesn't require alphabets, just a system robust enough to carry it. Recent discoveries suggest some Quipus may have encoded narratives, not just numbers, turning each knot into a potential word or event. If true, the Inca invented a three-dimensional writing system unlike anything else in human history. But we may never know for certain because the master Quipucamayox, the keepers of this knowledge, took their decoding skills to the grave. Now, let's descend from the Andes' cold peaks to the sun-baked river valleys where another civilization was shaping its destiny not with threads, but with something even more ordinary: wet earth and human hands. Because while the Inca recorded their world in knots, the Mesopotamians were building empires from the ground up, literally, one clay brick at a time. Between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, where the first cities clawed their way toward the heavens, an unassuming wooden frame revolutionized construction forever: the Babylonian brick mold. Picture a sun-baked workshop 4,000 years ago, where laborers packed mud and straw into rectangular molds, each producing identical bricks that dried into perfect building blocks. This wasn't just convenience, it was the birth of standardization, a concept so foundational we barely notice it today. While other cultures struggled with irregular stones or hand-shaped clay, Babylon's architects stacked these uniform bricks into soaring ziggurats, their precision defying the chaos of the natural world. The mold's genius wasn't in its complexity, just 4 wooden planks fastened together, but in what it represented, the idea that progress thrives on consistency. Consider the Ishtar Gate, its cobalt blue glazed bricks interlocking like pieces of a celestial puzzle. Without the mold's exacting dimensions, those iconic lions and dragons wouldn't have tessellated into a shimmering whole. But the impact went beyond beauty. Standardized bricks meant entire neighborhoods could rise in weeks, not years. Soldiers garrisoned in identical barracks, merchants stored goods in interchangeable warehouses, and when floods came, as they often did, rebuilding required no master architect, just another batch of molds. This was modular construction millennia before IKEA, a system so efficient it powered Babylon's transformation from a riverbank settlement to the ancient world's glittering capital. Yet the brick mold's true legacy lies in an unexpected place, maritime history, because while Babylon's towers reached for the sky, its merchants were solving a parallel problem at sea. Just as uniform bricks streamlined construction, standardized weights and measures transformed trade ships into floating economies. Phoenician vessels, laden with Babylonian bricks' mathematical precision, could calculate cargo loads to the ounce, ensuring stability on treacherous waters. The mold's philosophy of uniformity didn't just build cities, it built the networks that connected them. Now, let's set sail from Babylon's bustling ports to the open ocean, where our next tool didn't just carry goods, it harnessed the wind itself, turning merchants into explorers and coastlines into empires. Because while bricks anchored civilizations to the earth, one nautical innovation set them free to conquer the horizon. The Mediterranean Sea, 200 years before the Common Era, was a battleground where empires clashed not just with oars and sails, but with sheer ingenuity. Enter the Carthaginian Corvus, a hinged wooden gangplank tipped with an iron spike, swinging like a deadly pendulum from Roman warships. Picture this, a Carthaginian fleet, masters of naval maneuverability, suddenly finding their decks invaded as the Corvus slammed down, locking vessels together with a thunderous crash. What should have been a battle of seamanship became a brawl of legionaries, turning the Mediterranean's tides in Rome's favor overnight. This wasn't just a tool, it was a psychological weapon, rendering the enemy's naval expertise irrelevant with brute simplicity. What made the Corvus revolutionary wasn't its complexity, but its defiance of convention. Before its invention, naval combat relied on ramming or missile fire, skills Carthage had perfected over centuries. The Corvus bypassed all of it, exploiting Rome's real strength, disciplined infantry. A single swing of this boarding bridge neutralized superior ships, allowing Roman soldiers to fight as if on solid ground. Historical accounts describe how the device's spike, dubbed the Raven's Beak, pierced enemy decks, making disengagement impossible. At the Battle of Mylae, an outnumbered Roman fleet used Corvus tactics to capture 50 Carthaginian vessels, a staggering victory that marked the beginning of Rome's naval dominance. Yet the Corvus's success carried the seeds of its own demise. As Roman ships grew heavier to support the device's weight, they became sluggish in rough seas. A storm in 255 BCE sank an entire fleet, its top-heavy designs capsizing under the Corvus's burden. Some historians argue Rome abandoned it not because it failed, but because it worked too well. Once Carthage's navy was broken, the empire no longer needed this crutch. Others suggest evolving tactics like fire projectiles made the Corvus obsolete. Whatever the reason, its disappearance remains one of history's great what-ifs. Could Carthage have reclaimed the seas if Rome kept using it? Or was discarding the Corvus the true stroke of genius? Now, let's shift from the clamor of naval warfare to the quiet efficiency of logistics. Because while the Corvus won battles, another ancient innovation fed the armies that fought them, turning scarcity into sustenance on a scale that defied imagination. Across the endless steppes of 13th century Mongolia, where supply lines were non-existent and the land offered little sustenance, Genghis Khan's warriors carried their secret weapon not in their quivers but in their saddlebags. The Airag skin, a humble leather pouch sloshing with fermented mare's milk, was the lifeblood of history's most mobile army. Picture a rider galloping for days without stopping, his stomach nourished by this tangy, slightly alcoholic brew packed with probiotics, vitamins, and enough calories to fuel relentless campaigns. While European knights relied on pillaging villages for food, Mongol cavalry could traverse 600 miles in under 10 days, sustained entirely by what they carried, a logistical miracle that turned the steppes' scarcity into strategic advantage. What made Airag revolutionary wasn't just its nutrition, but its preservation science. Lactic acid fermentation prevented spoilage, while the leather skin's porousness allowed gases to escape without leaking, an ancient equivalent of modern vacuum sealing. Each warrior's Airag was a self-replenishing supply, fresh mare's milk added daily, fermented naturally from the existing culture, creating an endless cycle of sustenance. This wasn't just food, it was biochemistry harnessed for conquest. Historical accounts describe how Mongol armies outmaneuvered heavier forces simply by traveling farther and faster, their enemies collapsing from starvation while the Airag drinkers pressed on. Even the milk's slight alcohol content had tactical value, sterilizing water sources by adding Airag to questionable streams, a practice that reduced dysentery when besieging cities. Yet the Airag skin's disappearance after the Mongol Empire's fall reveals a deeper truth about military innovation. Without the nomadic lifestyle that necessitated portable nutrition, settled successors abandoned the practice. Later armies, tethered to supply wagons, lost the very mobility that made the Mongols unstoppable. The Airag didn't fail, the world around it changed. Today, historians recognize it as the precursor to modern field rations, though few energy drinks can claim such battlefield pedigree. Now, let's leave the windswept plains for the heart of ancient cities, where another forgotten innovation didn't fuel warriors, it protected entire populations from invisible threats. Because while the Mongols mastered portable nutrition, another civilization engineered the first line of defense against urban catastrophe, buried beneath the very streets they walked. The Theodosian walls didn't just surround Constantinople, they defied physics itself. Stretching 4 miles from the Sea of Marmara to the Golden Horn, this triple-layered monstrosity of stone and mortar laughed in the face of invaders for 800 years. Picture a 7th century Avari army staring up at these defenses, a 20-foot moat, an outer wall studded with towers, a 30-foot inner wall, and finally, a 40-foot tall main wall thick enough to park 3 chariots side by side. But the real genius wasn't in the height or the width. It was in the mortar binding those stones, a mystical mix of crushed brick, lime, and volcanic ash that hardened like iron over time. While other cities crumbled under siege engines, Constantinople's walls grew stronger with age, their mortar absorbing moisture to become nearly indestructible. What made these walls unbeatable wasn't just their construction, but their adaptability. Engineers designed them to swallow the energy of battering rams. Outer layers sacrificed themselves to dissipate force, leaving inner walls unscathed. Arrow slits angled downward forced attackers to expose their heads, while hidden sally ports allowed defenders to launch surprise counterattacks. Even the landscaping was a weapon. The ground sloped outward, making siege towers tilt precariously as they rolled forward. When the Arabs laid siege in 717, they brought the latest technology: catapults, rams, even early flamethrowers. After 13 months of failed assaults, they limped home, their weapons broken against walls that refused to yield. Yet the ultimate testament to the Theodosian wall's brilliance came in 1453. Though finally breached by Ottoman cannons after 53 days, they held so stubbornly that Mehmed the Conqueror lost a third of his artillery in the process. Modern engineers calculate that replicating their defensive capabilities would require concrete reinforced with steel, a material the Byzantines obviously lacked. Their secret, layers of redundancy and a mortar recipe so effective we've only recently decoded its chemistry. These walls didn't just protect a city, they preserved an empire's legacy until the last possible moment. Now let's shift from the grandeur of imperial defenses to the grit of ancient workshops, where another innovation didn't shield cities, it powered them. Because while Constantinople's walls kept invaders out, a humble water wheel kept civilization running within. Beneath the roar of Rome's aqueducts, hidden in the shadows of its bustling cities, a quieter revolution was turning, the relentless grind of water mills. These weren't just flour factories, they were ancient Rome's answer to industrial automation. Picture a massive wooden wheel, its paddles churning in a diverted river current, transferring power through a labyrinth of gears to spin millstones that could crush grain 24 hours a day. A single mill complex like Barbegal in southern France, with its cascading series of 16 wheels, produced enough flour to feed an entire legion, over 4.5 tons every day. This wasn't just efficiency, it was a seismic shift in how civilizations harnessed nature's forces. What made Roman water mills extraordinary wasn't just their scale, but their democratization of labor. Before them, grinding grain was backbreaking work done by hand or with donkeys, a chore that consumed hours of daily life, especially for women. The mills changed that. Suddenly, bakers could buy flour instead of making it, freeing countless hands for crafts, trade, or education. The ripple effects were profound. As bread became cheaper and more abundant, urban populations swelled, fueling Rome's expansion. Yet here's the twist: this technology wasn't new. The Greeks had built simple water mills centuries earlier. Rome's genius lay in standardization, deploying them across the empire with military precision, from the wheat fields of Egypt to the frontier outposts of Germania. So why did these marvels vanish after Rome's fall? The answer lies in the fragility of complex systems. Without imperial engineers to maintain aqueducts and sluices, without organized grain distribution to justify large-scale production, water mills became relics. Medieval Europe reverted to animal and human power, losing centuries of progress until the Domesday Book recorded just 5,000 mills in 11th century England, a fraction of Rome's network. The mill's fate mirrors a recurring theme in technological history. Innovation thrives not just on invention, but on the infrastructure and stability to sustain it. Now, let's leave the rushing waters behind for a tool that carved permanence into the very bones of the earth. Because while Roman mills harnessed rivers, another civilization was turning stone into libraries, chiseling words where they would outlast empires themselves. The Egyptian copper chisel wasn't just a tool, it was a sculptor of eternity. Picture a craftsman in the blinding sunlight of Giza, his mallet tapping rhythmically against a chisel's flattened end, each strike sending copper teeth biting into limestone. While iron tools would later dominate, copper's unique properties made it the perfect medium for Egypt's most enduring art. Soft enough to sharpen with river stones, yet durable under relentless pounding, these chisels allowed artisans to carve hieroglyphs so precise they've survived 5,000 years of wind and sand. The Great Sphinx's enigmatic smile, the delicate feathers of Horus's wings, the intricate folds of a pharaoh's ceremonial kilt, none would exist without this unassuming tool's ability to translate human skill into immortal stone. What set Egyptian copper chisels apart wasn't just their craftsmanship, but their chemistry. Archaeologists have found workshops where smiths alloyed copper with arsenic, creating blades that held an edge longer than pure copper. This innovation spread along trade routes, evolving as it traveled. In Mesopotamia, artisans used similar chisels to etch cuneiform into wet clay tablets. Minoan craftsmen on Crete adapted the design for fine metalwork, chasing intricate patterns into gold funeral masks. The copper chisel became a cultural chameleon, its basic form remaining constant, but its applications reflecting each civilization's artistic soul. Yet the chisel's greatest legacy might be what it reveals about ancient labor. Tomb paintings show teams of workers using copper tools to shape obelisks, proving these weren't just instruments for elite artisans. When Tutankhamun's tomb was sealed, workers left behind a copper chisel, perhaps intentionally as a bridge between worlds. Modern experiments prove one worker with a copper chisel could carve a cubic meter of limestone in 30 days. Multiply that by thousands of hands, and suddenly the pyramid's construction seems less supernatural and profoundly human, a testament to persistence amplified by simple, brilliant tools. Now, let's set aside the artistry of stone and turn to a tool that shaped something far more fleeting yet equally vital: the invisible currents of trade and trust that flowed between ancient marketplaces. Because while chisels carved history into walls, another invention measured the very pulse of commerce itself. In the bustling markets of ancient Lydia, where merchants once haggled over weights of silver and barley, a small metal disc changed human history forever, the world's first standardized coin. But behind this monetary revolution lay an even more pivotal innovation: the Lydian Coin Die. Picture a bronze stamp, its surface carved in reverse with the snarling lion emblem of King Aliats, hammered onto a lump of electrum with such force it left an indelible mark. This wasn't just decoration, it was a royal guarantee, transforming irregular nuggets of gold and silver into uniform currency. Suddenly, value wasn't measured by scales or guesswork. It was embedded in the coin itself, its weight and purity certified by the king's seal. What made these dies revolutionary wasn't just their craftsmanship, but the trust they engineered. Prior to Lydia's breakthrough, trade relied on barter or cumbersome metal ingots that required testing for purity with each transaction. The coin die eliminated that friction. A merchant in Ephesus could now accept payment from a stranger in Sardis without suspicion, recognizing the lion's familiar snarl. This tiny tool didn't just mint coins, it minted confidence, supercharging commerce across the Mediterranean. Within decades, Greek city-states adopted the technology, their own dies stamping owls, chariots, and gods onto currency. Even Persia's mighty darics, used to pay armies that toppled empires, owed their existence to Lydia's humble stamp. Yet the true genius of the coin die lay in its unintended consequences. Standardized money didn't just simplify trade, it democratized wealth. No longer were treasures locked in temple vaults or noble storehouses. A fisherman could save copper obols, a potter could charge drachmas, and soldiers could carry their pay in pockets rather than bulk. This liquidity fueled everything from Athenian democracy to Phoenician voyages, as ambition was no longer constrained by the logistics of barter. The dies themselves became guarded state secrets, their designs frequently changed to thwart counterfeiters, an ancient precursor to today's anti-forgery watermarks. But here's the twist: for all its impact, we don't know the name of the artisan who carved the first die. Like so many transformative tools, its creator faded into obscurity while their invention reshaped civilization. Modern dies still use the same basic principles: stamping presidents and queens onto coins with machines that owe their lineage to those Lydian workshops. Next time you pull change from your pocket, look closely. You're holding the direct descendant of history's quietest revolution. Now, let's journey from the mint's fiery furnaces to the open road, where another innovation didn't just carry goods, it carried ideas, stitching cultures together one turn of the wheel at a time. Because while coins moved wealth, our next tool moved the very fabric of society itself. The vast Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly beneath the stars, its currents whispering secrets only the initiated could understand. To untrained eyes, the Polynesian stick chart was just a chaotic lattice of palm ribs and shells, but to master navigators, these were living maps woven from memory, wave patterns, and celestial knowledge. Picture a voyager crouched in the hull of an outrigger canoe, tracing his fingers along the curved sticks that represented ocean swells refracting around distant atolls. Shells marked islands not by their shape, but by how the sea danced around them, a language of navigation so precise it guided settlers across 2,000 miles of open water to pinpoint specks of land. This wasn't just wayfinding, it was a symphony of environmental literacy, where every crest and trough told a story written in the movement of the sea itself. What made these charts revolutionary wasn't their materials, but their philosophy. Unlike European maps that froze geography onto parchment, stick charts were fluid, constantly updated by generations of navigators. The matang, a circular training chart, taught apprentices to read the ocean's subtle signatures, how waves bent around an atoll's underwater slopes, or how bird flight paths hinted at land beyond the horizon. The rebelib, used for long voyages, encoded entire archipelagos in its grid, with curved sticks mimicking how currents would push a canoe off course unless corrected. This was science disguised as art, a system so robust that modern researchers using satellite oceanography have found Polynesian wave pattern knowledge startlingly accurate. Yet the stick chart's true brilliance lay in its portability, not of the physical object, but of the knowledge it represented. Charts were often destroyed after use because the real map existed in the navigator's mind, reinforced by chants that memorized star paths and swell sequences. When British explorer James Cook marveled at Tahitian navigators finding islands with no other guide than the stars, he missed the deeper truth: their tools weren't just celestial but hydrographic. They sailed not by landmarks, but by the ocean's pulse, a skill honed through childhood games where blindfolded children learned to identify islands by the feel of canoe movements mimicking specific wave patterns. This tradition's near extinction reveals a painful irony. As Western maps spread, stick charts were dismissed as primitive curios, their sophistication overlooked until the 1970s, when Micronesian navigator Maupiailug famously guided a replica canoe from Hawaii to Tahiti without instruments, reviving interest in these forgotten techniques. Today, the few surviving charts in museums are more than artifacts, they're portals to a time when humanity navigated not by conquering nature, but by listening to it. Now, let's trade the ocean's rhythms for the clamor of the battlefield, where another tool didn't chart courses, it decided who lived or died in the shadow of empire. Because while Polynesian navigators mastered waves, Assyrian engineers were perfecting a weapon that would shape the fate of civilizations. The Assyrian siege tower wasn't just a weapon, it was a rolling fortress that turned impenetrable walls into mere speed bumps. Picture the terror of a defending soldier watching these monstrous wooden structures inch forward on creaking wheels, each one taller than the city gates, draped in water-soaked hides to repel fire arrows. Inside, shielded staircases funneled waves of armored troops straight onto the battlements, bypassing moats and murder holes with terrifying efficiency. This wasn't brute force, it was psychological warfare made tangible. When King Sennacherib's armies rolled these towers against Lachish in 701 BCE, the city's fate was sealed before the first Assyrian boot touched its walls. What set these towers apart wasn't just their scale, some spanned multiple stories, but their adaptability. Assyrian engineers prefabricated them from interchangeable parts, allowing armies to assemble them rapidly from local timber. Historical reliefs show towers with retractable drawbridges that became gangplanks and rotating platforms for archers to provide covering fire. The real genius, though, lay in their logistics. Unlike stationary battering rams, siege towers could be repositioned mid-battle, forcing defenders to spread thin their resources. At the Siege of Babylon in 689 BCE, Assyrians deployed a dozen towers simultaneously, overwhelming sections of wall that had stood unbroken for generations. Yet the siege tower's dominance carried the seeds of its obsolescence. As fortifications grew thicker and higher, think Constantinople's legendary walls, these wooden giants became impractical to construct. The advent of gunpowder rendered them obsolete overnight, their lumber frames splintering under cannon fire, but their legacy endured in unexpected ways. Medieval castle builders, inspired by Assyrian designs, incorporated siege tower, like hoardings, wooden galleries projecting from stone walls, giving defenders the same elevated advantage. Even modern fire trucks with telescoping ladders owe a conceptual debt to these ancient war machines. Now, let's unravel a subtler revolution, one that didn't conquer cities, but clothed empires. Because while siege towers broke through walls, another invention stitched together the very fabric of civilization, thread by delicate thread. High in the Andes, where thin air makes every breath a labor, Quechua weavers created masterpieces with nothing but wooden sticks and tension from their own bodies. The backstrap loom wasn't just a tool, it was a portable factory, a storytelling device, and a sacred bond between generations. Picture a weaver seated on the ground, one end of the loom tied to a tree and the other wrapped around her waist, her spine becoming the fulcrum for every intricate pass of brightly dyed alpaca wool. With each backward lean, she tightened the warp threads. With each forward motion, her fingers danced the weft through, building patterns that mapped constellations, recorded battles, and whispered prayers to Pachamama, the Earth Mother. This was literacy in thread, a language so precise that certain designs could identify a wearer's village at a glance. What made this loom revolutionary wasn't its complexity, but its adaptability. Unlike bulky European floor looms requiring workshops, the backstrap could be set up anywhere: a mountainside, a market stall, even a battlefield. Spanish chroniclers described Inca armies on the march, soldiers' wives weaving tunics and tents simultaneously as the camp moved. The textiles themselves were so vital they functioned as currency. A finely woven unku tunic could trade for a week's food, while elite Campi cloth woven so tightly it repelled rain was reserved for nobility and ritually burned as offerings. But the loom's true genius lay in its pedagogy. Girls learned by weaving small practice strips called watan, their mistakes intentionally left visible as a reminder that mastery comes through imperfection, a philosophy starkly opposed to Europe's pursuit of flawless uniformity. Then came the rupture. Spanish colonizers, baffled by textiles they dismissed as primitive, imposed European floor looms and demanded mass-produced plain cloth. Traditional patterns depicting mountain gods were banned as idolatry, and with them, generations of encoded knowledge vanished. Yet in remote valleys, elders secretly kept the old ways alive, teaching children to read the ancestral patterns like hidden maps. Today's resurgence of backstrap weaving isn't just craft preservation, it's cultural decipherment, as anthropologists work with weavers to reconstruct lost narratives thread by thread. The surviving textiles are now recognized as some of history's most sophisticated, with some containing over 200 threads per inch, a density surpassing modern industrial looms. Now let's unravel a different kind of thread, one that didn't weave fabric but illuminated darkness itself. Because while Andean looms stitched together communities, another ancient invention was chasing away the night, turning shadows into workspaces and extending the very hours of human achievement. In the flickering glow of a Roman evening, where shadows once dictated the end of work and study, a humble revolution was taking shape, not in grand temples or senate halls, but in the cluttered workshops of anonymous potters. The Roman oil lamp mold, an unassuming terracotta matrix, transformed light from a luxury into a democratic commodity. Picture row upon row of these molds, each pressing wet clay into identical shallow bowls with pinched spouts, ready to be fired and filled with cheap olive oil. A single workshop could produce hundreds daily, stacking them like modern batteries in merchant stalls across the empire. For the price of a loaf of bread, even a farmhand could own a lamp that burned for hours, pushing back the darkness that had governed human schedules since the dawn of time. This wasn't just about convenience, it was a seismic shift in productivity. Scholars could read into the night, their scrolls illuminated by steady flames. Artisans carved intricate cameos by lamplight, their precision work no longer hostage to sunset. Taverns buzzed with late-night commerce, while bakers kneaded dough before dawn, their ovens glowing alongside rows of flickering lamps. The mold's genius lay in its standardization. Every lamp's consistent shape ensured optimal wick placement and airflow, reducing smoke and maximizing brightness. Archaeologists have found nearly identical lamps from Britain to Syria, proof of an empire-wide supply chain that functioned like an ancient version of mass production. Yet the oil lamp's decline holds a paradox. As Rome's infrastructure crumbled, so did the networks that delivered cheap fuel. Without imperial roads to transport olive oil efficiently, lamps became useless ornaments. Candles, once a niche product, filled the void, their tallow easier to source locally but far smokier and dimmer. It would take centuries for lighting to regain its Roman efficiency, a testament to how fragile even the most transformative technologies can be when their supporting systems vanish. Now, let's turn our gaze upward from these earthly flames to the celestial ones, because while oil lamps conquered the night below, another tool was mapping the heavens above, not with clay, but with calibrated bronze and the meticulous patience of priests who believed the stars held divine secrets. Long before telescopes pierced the night sky, Babylonian astronomers held the universe in their palms not as stargazers, but as mathematicians wielding the world's first portable cosmos. The Babylonian Astrolabe wasn't just a star chart. It was a bronze calculator that predicted celestial movements with eerie precision. Picture a priest astronomer in the ziggurate's shadow, rotating the device's stacked disks to align with the season, each perforation revealing which constellations would dominate the night. But this wasn't about navigation, it was about survival. The same tool that tracked Ishtar's sacred path across the heavens also told farmers when to sow barley and warned kings of omens hidden in planetary alignments. What made the astrolabe revolutionary was its dual nature, equal parts scientific instrument and sacred text. The Babylonians didn't separate astronomy from astrology. They saw the stars as a divine ledger where gods wrote their intentions. By recording centuries of observations on cuneiform tablets, they discovered patterns even modern software confirms. The 18-year Saros cycle of eclipses, the precise length of a solar year, Jupiter's retrograde motion. Their astrolabes encoded this knowledge into tactile mathematics. One surviving example from Nineveh could calculate sunrise times for any date within a 32-year span, a feat requiring knowledge of the Earth's axial tilt that wouldn't be rediscovered until Hipparchus in the 2nd century BCE. Yet the astrolabe's disappearance for over a millennium reveals a paradox. As Babylon fell, its astronomical archives were preserved, but the tools to interpret them vanished. Greek and Roman scholars revered Babylonian data, yet lacked the cultural context to replicate their devices. It took Arab astronomers of the 8th century to resurrect the astrolabe, combining Babylonian precision with Greek geometry into instruments that guided ships from the Indian Ocean to the Atlantic. The irony, those medieval astrolabes, now celebrated as Islamic inventions, owed their core algorithms to anonymous Babylonian scholars whose names were erased by time. Now, let's descend from the celestial to the terrestrial, where another forgotten tool didn't chart stars, it moved mountains. Because while Babylonian priests mapped the heavens, their engineers were perfecting a technology that would reshape the earth itself, one massive stone at a time. The Egyptian plumb bob wasn't just a tool, it was gravity itself harnessed as a guiding hand. Picture a pyramid builder standing on a scaffold hundreds of feet above the desert, lowering this simple weighted string to check the alignment of each massive limestone block. While modern engineers rely on laser levels and GPS, the plumb bob achieved near-perfect precision with nothing but a carved stone weight and flaxen cord. The Great Pyramid sides deviate from true vertical by less than 1/15 of a degree, a margin so slim it would take sophisticated instruments to detect. This humble device didn't just build monuments, it turned human ambition into mathematical reality. What made the plumb bob extraordinary wasn't its complexity, but its unerring reliability. Egyptian architects understood that gravity never lies. The cord's vertical drop became their unwavering reference point. Tomb paintings show priests using plumb bobs during temple rituals, aligning sacred structures with celestial events like the solstice sunrise. The tool's influence extended beyond construction. It shaped their cosmology, reinforcing the belief that order mat governed the universe. Even the pyramid's ascending corridors, designed to guide pharaohs' souls to the stars, were verified with plumb lines to ensure their celestial alignment. Yet the plumb bob's true genius lay in its adaptability. Workers could fashion one from any material. A stone tied with reeds sufficed, making it accessible to every tier of society. Modern excavations have found miniature plumb bobs in artisans' workshops, evidence that this tool democratized precision. Today's skyscrapers owe their straight lines to laser-guided versions of the same principle, proving some innovations are so fundamental they transcend time. Now, let's shift from the grandeur of monuments to the quiet sustenance of daily life. Because while the plumb bob built pyramids, another ancient invention ensured those builders never worked on empty stomachs. A device so efficient it turned barren floodplains into bread baskets capable of feeding millions. The Chinese dragon bone pump didn't just move water. It defied gravity itself, lifting rivers uphill with nothing but wooden paddles and human ingenuity. Picture a line of farmers treadling foot pedals along a riverbank, their synchronized steps driving an endless chain of square pallets that scooped water from below and dumped it into irrigation channels above. This deceptively simple mechanism could elevate water over 15 feet, transforming barren hillsides into cascading rice terraces that fed millions. While the Great Wall symbolized China's might, the dragon bone pump was its beating heart, sustaining harvests through droughts and floods alike. Dynasties rose and fell, but this unassuming tool kept bowls filled across the centuries. What made this pump revolutionary wasn't its complexity, but its scalability. Peasants could build one from local bamboo and wood, requiring no scarce metals or elite craftsmen. The design spread like wildfire during the Song dynasty, when agricultural manuals detailed its construction with almost democratic clarity, a stark contrast to Europe's closely guarded mill technologies. Historians estimate that by the Ming dynasty, over 2 million dragon bone pumps hummed across China's landscapes, their collective labor equivalent to dozens of Roman aqueducts. Yet, unlike those monumental stone relics, the pumps left little trace. Rotting wood and bamboo returned to the earth, erasing their legacy even as their impact endured in every grain of rice that stabilized empires. The real mystery isn't how it worked, but why it remained confined to Asia for so long. Arab travelers documented these pumps as early as the 13th century, and Jesuit missionaries sketched them in the 1600s. Yet Europe clung to inefficient bucket chains and water wheels until the Industrial Revolution. Some scholars blame cultural inertia. Others note that China's rice-based economy demanded precise water control, unlike Europe's wheat fields. Whatever the reason, the dragon bone pump's obscurity highlights a recurring theme. Tools that reshape civilizations often vanish not because they fail, but because they succeed too quietly. Now let's journey from China's terraced hills to the windswept steppes of Central Asia, where another invention didn't just connect fields, it connected empires. Because while the dragon bone pump nourished civilizations, the next tool would stitch them together across vast and treacherous distances. Beneath the blistering sands of Persia's deserts, an ancient marvel snaked silently through the darkness. The qanat, a subterranean river carved by human hands. Picture a line of laborers digging vertical shafts into parched earth at precise intervals, then connecting them with gently sloping tunnels that channeled water from distant mountains to arid valleys. This wasn't just irrigation, it was hydrological alchemy, turning wastelands into orchards without a single drop lost to evaporation. While Roman aqueducts marched proudly across the landscape, qanats worked in secret, their existence betrayed only by crescent-shaped mounds of excavated earth dotting the desert like silent sentinels. The qanat's brilliance lay in its marriage of simplicity and precision. Engineers used nothing more than weighted strings and sighting rods to calculate gradients, ensuring water flowed just fast enough to prevent stagnation but slow enough to avoid erosion. Each tunnel's depth was calibrated to tap into underground aquifers without draining them, a sustainable practice modern hydrologists still admire. At its peak, Persia's qanat network stretched over 170,000 miles, enough to circle the Earth 7 times, and supplied water to cities like Gonabad, where some tunnels still function after nearly 3,000 years. These weren't just water channels, they were the circulatory system of an empire, enabling caravanserais to bloom in the desert and armies to march where no river flowed. What's astonishing isn't just the qanat's longevity, but its democratizing power. Unlike centralized aqueducts requiring imperial wealth, qanats were built and maintained by local communities. Villages along a qanat's path shared water rights proportionally to their contribution of labor, a system so fair it prevented conflicts over this precious resource. The technology spread along the Silk Road, adapting to terrains from Morocco to China. Even today, over 37,000 qanats supply 75% of Iran's water needs, their cool tunnels naturally filtering water while modern pipes corrode. Yet the qanat's greatest lesson might be its humility. While mega-projects like dams reshaped landscapes visibly, qanats worked unseen, respecting natural water tables and minimizing ecological disruption. In an age of climate crises, their legacy whispers a question. What if our most transformative solutions aren't about conquering nature, but collaborating with it? Now, let's emerge from these life-giving tunnels to face an invention that conquered not thirst, but chaos itself, the tool that turned scattered warriors into unstoppable legions. The Macedonian Sarissa wasn't just a spear, it was a revolution disguised as a wooden pole. Picture the chaos of a Persian battlefield as Alexander's phalanxes advanced, their 18-foot pikes bristling like a moving forest. Opponents armed with standard spears found themselves outmatched before they could even swing, the Sarissa's deadly reach skewering them 5 feet sooner than their own weapons could retaliate. This wasn't just a longer spear, it was a mathematical advantage, turning each row of soldiers into an impenetrable wall of sharpened cornel wood and iron. When Alexander faced Darius at Gaugamela, the Sarissa's relentless forward thrust didn't just win the battle, it shattered an empire's confidence in centuries of traditional warfare. What made the Sarissa unstoppable wasn't just its length, but the system behind it. Each soldier gripped it with both hands, his shield strapped to the forearm, creating a formation where the first 5 rows of pikes projected beyond the front line. The result, a phalanx that could repel cavalry charges and break infantry lines with mechanical efficiency. Historical accounts describe how Persian horses reared in terror at the sight of this advancing thicket, their riders helpless against what one chronicler called a porcupine made of men. Yet the Sarissa's true genius lay in its balance, light enough to maneuver during grueling marches across deserts and mountains, yet sturdy enough to withstand the clash of battle. Craftsmen seasoned the wood for years to prevent warping, and the iron spearheads were designed to snap off upon impact, preventing enemies from grabbing and disrupting the formation. So why did this game-changing weapon disappear after Alexander's death? The answer lies in its own success. The Sarissa demanded rigorous training and flawless coordination qualities that faded as Alexander's empire fragmented. Later Hellenistic armies, lacking his tactical brilliance, used the Sarissa as a crutch, forming increasingly rigid formations that became vulnerable to more mobile Roman legions. At the Battle of Pydna in 168 BCE, the Romans exploited this weakness, breaking the Macedonian phalanx by luring it onto uneven terrain where the Sarissa's length became a liability. Like many specialized tools, its downfall came not from failure, but from an inability to adapt when the world changed around it. Now, let's shift from the battlefields of conquest to the quiet halls of preservation. Because while the Sarissa carved empires, another ancient innovation was ensuring their knowledge would never be forgotten, a tool that turned fleeting words into permanent records, one inked stroke at a time. The Byzantine Greek fire siphon wasn't just a weapon, it was liquid terror unleashed upon the waves. Picture the horror of an Arab sailor in 678. Watching in disbelief as a stream of fire arched from a Byzantine dromon, clinging to the water's surface like a living thing, igniting ships and men alike with a heat so intense even seawater couldn't quench it. This wasn't ordinary fire, it was a concoction so secret that only the imperial family and a handful of chemists knew its formula, passed down in whispers like a sacred rite. When Constantinople's walls trembled under siege, Greek fire became the empire's fiery guardian, turning the very sea into an ally that burned invaders alive. What made this weapon revolutionary wasn't just its flammability, but its delivery. The siphon, a pressurized bronze tube mounted on ships, could spray the substance over 100 feet with terrifying accuracy. Historical accounts describe how the liquid ignited midair, creating firestorms that forced entire fleets to scatter in panic. Some versions even included grenades, ceramic pots filled with the mixture and hurled by catapults, exploding on impact. The psychological impact was as devastating as the flames. Enemies would retreat at the mere sight of the siphon's distinctive nozzles, knowing no armor could protect them from this otherworldly inferno. Yet Greek fire's greatest strength, its secrecy, also ensured its disappearance. By the 13th century, the formula vanished, possibly because the specialists who crafted it died without heirs during political upheavals. Modern chemists still debate its composition, guessing at ingredients like quicklime, naphtha, or pine resin, but no recreation fully matches ancient descriptions of a fire that clung and screamed. The siphons' mechanics were equally lost. Sketches from Byzantine manuscripts show elaborate pumps and valves, but without the precise metallurgy or pressure seals, the technology faded into legend. This disappearance poses a haunting question. How could an empire guard its greatest weapon too closely? Unlike the Roman ballista or Mongol recurve bow, which spread through conquest, Greek fire's secrecy meant it couldn't outlive its keepers. When Constantinople finally fell in 1453, no one remembered how to awaken the sleeping fire, a stark reminder that even the mightiest tools are only as enduring as the knowledge that fuels them. Now let's extinguish these flames and step into the sunlight of ancient Athens, where another invention didn't conquer through destruction, but through the power of collective voice. Because while Greek fire defended empires, a simple clay shard would give birth to democracy itself. In the shadow of Athens' marble temples, where philosophers debated justice and citizens shaped history, democracy's survival sometimes hinged on a pile of broken pottery. The humble Ostracon, a discarded shard of ceramic, became the ultimate weapon against tyranny. Picture the bustling agora on voting day, where free men queued to scratch a name into clay fragments, each scrap a potential death sentence for political ambition gone too far. When the votes were tallied, whoever crossed the 6,000 vote threshold faced 10 years of exile, his property untouched but his influence severed like a diseased limb. This wasn't just banishment, it was collective surgery, removing threats to democracy with the same precision as a surgeon's scalpel. The brilliance of ostracism lay not in its cruelty, but its restraint. Unlike bloody purges that left power vacuums, this ritualized expulsion gave factions a pressure valve while preserving civic peace. Historians uncovered piles of these shards bearing names like Themistocles and Aristide's heroes one day, perceived threats the next. Some ostraka even show hasty misspellings, proof of last-minute campaigns where illiterate citizens copied names from pre-written samples. The system wasn't perfect. Wealthy elites could stockpile shards with rivals' names, but its mere existence forced leaders to heed the demo's voice. Modern elections still echo this principle: the secret ballot, the peaceful transfer of power, the idea that no individual is bigger than the system itself. Yet the Ostracon's true legacy might be what it reveals about democracy's fragility. When Athenian factions weaponized ostracism for petty feuds rather than genuine threats, the practice lost legitimacy. By 415 BCE, it was replaced by trials, a shift from community judgment to legal technicalities. The broken shards left behind whisper a warning: tools of democracy rot when their spirit is forgotten. Now let's journey from the birthplace of self-rule to the windswept plains where another invention didn't shape government. It connected them across vast distances, carrying not votes, but the lifeblood of empires themselves. The Viking Sunstone wasn't just a crystal, it was a sliver of the sky itself, clutched in a navigator's calloused hand. Picture a longship cutting through North Atlantic fog, so thick the sun vanished for days, its crew relying on nothing but this translucent wedge of calcite to find their way. By rotating the stone against the overcast heavens, Norse sailors could detect the hidden polarization patterns of sunlight, revealing the sun's position like a ghostly compass needle. This wasn't mere folklore. Archaeologists found such a crystal aboard a 1592 shipwreck, its edges worn smooth from centuries of use. Suddenly, The saga's accounts of Vikings reaching Newfoundland through relentless cloud cover made chilling sense. They'd harnessed light's very physics to conquer the impossible. What made the Sunstone revolutionary wasn't its complexity, but its defiance of nature's limits. While other cultures waited helplessly for clear skies, Viking navigators held the sun's coordinates in their palms, even at twilight or through storm clouds. Recent experiments prove the method's astonishing accuracy. Using calcite under simulated Norse conditions, modern sailors could determine the sun's location within 5 degrees, enough to navigate from Norway to Greenland without a single clear horizon. The Sunstone's true power lay in its synergy with other tools. Combined with bearing dials and depth sounding lines, it formed a navigation system so robust that Viking traders established routes from Constantinople to North America centuries before Columbus. Yet the Sunstone's disappearance whispers a cautionary tale. As Christianity spread across Scandinavia, the old ways, including celestial navigation tied to Norse gods, faded into superstition. By the 1400s, magnetic compasses imported from the Mediterranean replaced these magic crystals. The Sunstone didn't fail. It was abandoned for newer technology, its principles forgotten until 20th century scientists rediscovered them in polarimetry. Today, pilots and sailors use electronic versions of the same physics Vikings once held in their hands, proof that ancient innovation often outpaces our willingness to remember it. Now, let's chart a course from the Vikings' mist-shrouded voyages to the bustling trade routes of the Sahara, where another tool didn't navigate by light, but by the weight of trust itself. Because while Sunstones guided ships, the next invention measured the very soul of commerce, turning suspicion into certainty, one balanced scale at a time. The rhythmic chime of brass bells echoed through the jagged mountain passes of the Silk Road, a sound more precious to merchants than gold itself. These weren't decorations, they were the caravan bells of ancient traders, each resonant tone cutting through howling winds to signal safe passage or warn of lurking bandits. Picture a line of camels stretching to the horizon, their saddles fitted with bells tuned to distinct pitches, creating a living musical map across deserts and steppes. When the high sea of a lead bell suddenly fell silent, every merchant knew to halt. A potential ambush lay ahead. But when the deep G of a trail guard's bell rang steady, it meant clear paths and friendly outposts, allowing exhausted travelers to finally lower their guards. What made these bells revolutionary wasn't just their function as alarms, but their role as cultural translators. Different regions along the Silk Road developed unique bell codes, a language without words that Mongols, Persians, and Chinese merchants all understood. Archaeologists have unearthed bells near Dunhuang decorated with both Buddhist lotus motifs and Zoroastrian fire symbols, proof that their sound transcended belief systems. The bells also carried practical genius. Their constant noise masked the clinking of valuables, making it harder for thieves to identify which camels carried silk or spices. Some caravan masters even used hollow bells stuffed with wool to muffle their sound when passing through lawless territories, turning silence itself into a strategic tool. Yet the caravan bell's deepest legacy lies in the connections they forged. A merchant from Venice might not speak a word of Sogdian, but he knew the cheerful triple chime meant a Samarkand tea house welcomed outsiders. The bells became sonic breadcrumbs, guiding Marco Polo's father through the Pamirs and helping Zhang Qian's envoys navigate back to China. Modern highways still trace routes first mapped by these ancient sound waves, proof that sometimes the most enduring tools aren't seen but heard. Now let's leave the jingling trails of the Silk Road for a tool that didn't just mark space but mastered it. An invention so precise it could measure the heavens themselves, turning starlight into a roadmap for empires. Beneath the Mediterranean's turquoise waves, encrusted with 2,000 years of coral and sediment, lay history's most confounding artifact, the Antikythera Mechanism. When sponge divers stumbled upon its corroded remains in 1901, they couldn't fathom the twisted bronze gears they'd salvaged from the wreckage. This wasn't some simple navigational tool or ornate timepiece. X-ray scans would later reveal an intricate assembly of 37 interlocking gears, dials tracking lunar cycles with tooth-perfect precision, and inscriptions predicting solar eclipses decades in advance. Imagine a Greek philosopher turning this hand-cranked device to see the exact date of the next Olympic Games or the positions of all 5 known planets. A portable cosmos forged from bronze, its complexity unmatched until European clockmakers 15 centuries later. What makes the Antikythera Mechanism revolutionary isn't just its sophistication, but its isolation in time. Every gear ratio corresponds perfectly with Babylonian astronomical records, proving its creators merged mathematics from Mesopotamia with Greek mechanical genius. The device even accounted for the moon's elliptical orbit using a pin and slot mechanism that essentially functioned as the world's first differential gear, a concept modern engineers assumed was invented in the 1700s. Yet despite its brilliance, no similar devices appear in ancient texts or archaeological records. Was this a lone masterpiece from Archimedes' lost workshop? A secret priestly technology guarded by Mediterranean temples, the ship carrying it likely sank while transporting loot from Greece to Rome, suggesting such mechanisms may have been rare even in antiquity. The real mystery isn't how it worked, but why its knowledge vanished. Some scholars believe the rise of Christianity suppressed pagan astronomical tools. Others point to the collapse of bronze-smithing guilds as the Roman Empire declined. Whatever the reason, the Antikythera Mechanism stands as a haunting what-if, proof that technological progress isn't inevitable but fragile. Had its design survived, might Galileo have held a geared computer instead of a simple telescope? Would Newton have inherited centuries of mechanical astronomy? The answers sank with that ship off Antikythera, leaving us to wonder how different history might look if this ancient computer hadn't been lost to the sea. Now let's shift from celestial calculations to earthly foundations, because while the Antikythera Mechanism mapped the heavens, our next tool shaped the very ground empires walked upon. In the sun-drenched groves of the Mediterranean, where olive trees twisted their way toward the sky, the Roman volute press turned fruit into fortune with ruthless efficiency. Picture a massive stone basin where workers raked olives into a crushing path, their pits and flesh ground by a millstone turned by donkey or slave. But the real magic happened in the press itself, a towering screw mechanism of hardwood and iron that descended with slow, inexorable force, squeezing every precious drop from the pulp. This wasn't just a tool, it was an economic engine, transforming bitter drupes into liquid gold that fueled lamps, moistened bread, and greased the wheels of trade from Hispania to Syria. What set the volute press apart wasn't its brute strength, but its precision. Earlier Greek lever presses wasted half the oil, leaving it trapped in the mash. The Roman design, with its weighted screw and stacked woven baskets, could extract 80% of the fruit's yield, a margin so impressive that modern hydraulic presses only surpassed it in the 19th century. The impact rippled across empires. A single estate's press could produce over 1,000 gallons annually, turning local harvests into export commodities. Amphorae stamped with producers' marks crisscrossed the sea, their content so vital that Roman soldiers received part of their pay in oil rations. Yet the press's true legacy lay in its democratization of luxury. Unlike spices or silk reserved for elites, olive oil became ubiquitous, used by peasants to preserve cheese, by gladiators to scrape sweat from their skin, and by cities to burn in street lamps that defied the night. The volute press didn't just feed economies, it illuminated civilizations, one crushing turn at a time. Now, let's trade the olive groves for the forge's fiery heart, where another tool didn't just sustain life, it decided who would survive the clash of steel and shield. Because while the volute press nourished empires, the next invention would arm them for conquest. Deep in the Anatolian highlands, where fire and earth conspired to birth a new era, the Hittite iron chisel struck a blow that would echo through millennia. Unlike the softer bronze tools of their rivals, this hardened edge could carve limestone like butter, shaping fortresses and temples with unprecedented precision. But its true power lay beyond construction sites. It was the linchpin of an empire's military dominance. Picture Hittite armorers hammering iron scales for helmets that turned away bronze spear tips, or blacksmiths forging weapons that held their edge through battle after battle. While Egypt and Mesopotamia clung to bronze, the Hittites guarded their iron smelting techniques like state secrets, even imprisoning skilled metalworkers to prevent knowledge leaks. What set their iron apart wasn't just hardness but consistency. Earlier iron often shattered under stress, riddled with impurities from inefficient smelting. Hittite furnaces, fueled by oak charcoal and superheated with bellows, reached temperatures high enough to purge excess carbon, yielding wrought iron both malleable and resilient. Surviving reliefs at Hattusa show artisans using these chisels to incise intricate cuneiform into temple walls, a testament to iron's dual role as both weapon and artistic tool. The same metal that armored charioteers also captured prayers to the storm god Teshub, immortalizing faith in stone. Yet iron's supremacy carried a paradox. Despite their technological edge, the Hittite Empire crumbled around 1200 BCE. Its capital burned and abandoned. Climate change, invasion, and internal strife all played roles, but the deeper lesson lies in knowledge hoarding. By restricting ironcraft to elite guilds, the Hittites created a bottleneck when crisis came. There weren't enough skilled smiths to adapt. Meanwhile, their scattered techniques seeded innovation elsewhere. Philistine blacksmiths in Canaan and Mycenaean forgers in Greece reverse-engineered, captured Hittite weapons, accelerating iron's spread after the empire's fall. The chisel's legacy outlasted its creators. Within centuries, iron tools rebuilt the world the Hittites had lost not through conquest, but through the quiet persistence of craft. Every cathedral spire rising in medieval Europe, every railroad tie laid in the industrial age, owed a debt to those Anatolian furnaces. Some revolutions aren't won on battlefields, but at the anvil, where fire and human ingenuity forge destinies one strike at a time. Now, let's turn from the smith's fiery crucible to the cool precision of the scribe's workshop, where another tool didn't shape stone, but the very flow of language itself. Because while iron chisels carved empires, a humble reed would script their stories for eternity. In the scorching deserts of Rajasthan, where the sun bleaches bones and drought lingers for years, the Chand Baori stepwell wasn't just a water source, it was a subterranean cathedral to survival itself. Imagine standing at the edge of this colossal inverted pyramid, its 13 stories of precisely carved steps descending into cool darkness like a geometric mirage. 3,500 steps, each one a calculated masterpiece, formed a labyrinthine staircase that allowed entire villages to access water even as the monsoon rains failed and surface wells turned to dust. But this wasn't mere practicality carved in sandstone. Look closer and you'll find delicate Jaroka balconies, intricate latticework, and niches that once held oil lamps, transforming the well into a shimmering beacon at night. The Chand Baori didn't just store water, It ritualized it, blending Hindu cosmology with hydroengineering. The steps' precise angles minimized evaporation, while the depth equivalent to a 7-story building kept water cool enough to preserve perishables lowered in nets. What made stepwells revolutionary wasn't just their engineering, but their social architecture. While European castles hoarded water in private cisterns, Chand Baori's design encouraged gathering. Women trading gossip on the steps became informal news networks. Merchants negotiated deals in shaded alcoves, and traveling bards performed for crowds on the terraces. These weren't pits, they were pulsating community centers where the rhythm of daily life followed the water's ebb and flow. Even the carvings served dual purposes. Floral motifs doubled as erosion-resistant textures, and deities etched near the waterline marked safe diving depths during shortages. Yet today, many stepwells lie choked with trash or forgotten beneath modern developments. The reasons are as layered as the steps themselves. British colonizers, baffled by these unhygienic public reservoirs, promoted piped water systems that severed the communal ties stepwells nurtured. Post-independence, groundwater pumps rendered their painstaking engineering obsolete until aquifers began collapsing from overuse. Now, as Rajasthan faces apocalyptic droughts, archaeologists are racing to restore these ancient climate-resilient systems. The irony: modern hydrologists confirm stepwells recharged aquifers more sustainably than any pump. While their shade and airflow naturally inhibited algae growth, solutions were now rediscovering at great cost. The Chand Baori's fading whispers a warning. Sometimes the most advanced technology isn't the newest but the wisest. Now, let's ascend from these watery depths to a tool that didn't sustain bodies but expanded minds, an invention that turned memory itself into an empire's most powerful weapon. In the steamy jungles of the Yucatan, where howler monkeys roared and ceiba trees stretched toward the gods, Mayan scribes performed miracles with a simple wooden paddle. The bark paper beater looked unremarkable, just a smooth, flattened club, but in skilled hands, it transformed the inner skin of wild fig trees into sheets as white as bone and as durable as leather. Picture a craftsman rhythmically pounding soaked bark fibers against a stone slab, each strike aligning cellulose strands into a seamless matrix. The resulting amotl paper could fold like cloth, resist tropical humidity for centuries, and absorb the vivid pigments of sacred inks. This wasn't just stationery, it was the DNA of a civilization, recording everything from royal genealogies to astronomical tables in glyphs as precise as they were beautiful. What made the beater revolutionary wasn't its mechanics, but its legacy. While European parchment yellowed and cracked, Mayan codices folded into accordion-style books remained supple enough to survive jungle downpours. The Dresden Codex, one of 4 surviving manuscripts, contains Venus cycle calculations accurate to 1 day in 500 years. But here's the tragedy: Spanish friars, fearing pagan knowledge, burned thousands of these books in the 1600s. Bishop Diego de Landa's infamous Auto da Fe in 1562 consumed an estimated 90% of Mayan literature, a cultural holocaust that erased medical treatises, historical chronicles, and possibly even early maps of the Americas. The beater's fate mirrors this loss. As paper-making knowledge faded, so did the tool's significance. Modern experiments reveal its genius. The pounding action didn't just flatten fibers, it activated natural starches that acted as binders, creating paper without glue. Contemporary conservationists now use similar techniques to preserve surviving codices, their colors still shockingly vibrant after 800 years. Yet the deepest wounds aren't in what we lost, but in what we'll never know. The Mayan calendar's so-called end date in 2012 sparked global frenzy precisely because so few original texts remained to contextualize it. Now let's ascend from the scribe's dim workshop to the open sky, where another tool didn't record history. It predicted the future by tracing the paths of celestial gods across the vault of heaven. Because while bark paper captured knowledge, the next invention conversed with the cosmos itself. In the year 132, as the Han Dynasty's scholars debated celestial omens, a bronze dragon suddenly spat a metal ball into the waiting mouth of a bronze toad below. Zhang Heng's seismoscope had just detected an earthquake, one so distant that no one in Luoyang's court had felt the tremor. Days later, messengers arrived confirming the quake's devastation in a province 400 miles away. This wasn't magic, it was mechanical genius disguised as art. The device, a towering urn adorned with 8 dragon heads, each clutching a ball above corresponding toads, hid a pendulum system so sensitive it could pinpoint seismic waves' direction. When the earth shook, the pendulum swayed, tripping a lever inside one dragon's throat to release its ball. The precision was staggering. Modern recreations show it could detect quakes as faint as magnitude 4 from over 100 miles away, a sensitivity Europe wouldn't match until the 1800s. Zhang Heng's breakthrough wasn't just in detection, but in paradigm. At a time when earthquakes were blamed on divine wrath or misaligned stars, his seismoscope framed them as measurable physical phenomena. The device's inner workings remain debated. Some scholars propose it used inverted pendulums. Others suggest suspended weights, but its impact was undeniable. Provincial governors began installing replicas, creating the world's first seismic monitoring network. The real marvel, it required no external power. Like a bronze sunflower turning toward unseen storms, the seismoscope responded to forces invisible to human senses, translating the Earth's whispers into tangible warnings. Yet its legacy is bittersweet. When the Han Dynasty fell, so did institutional support for such inventions. Later dynasties dismissed the seismoscope as a curiosity, its principles forgotten until Jesuit missionaries brought European seismology to China in the 17th century. The original was lost to time, surviving only in descriptions. Modern engineers have tried for decades to reconstruct its mechanism, but none fully replicate its reported accuracy. Perhaps some secrets are etched not in bronze, but in the ephemeral space between genius and the ages that failed to preserve it. Now, let's shift from the tremors of the earth to the tremors of the human soul, because while Zhang Heng's device measured quakes, our next tool shaped how civilizations measured beauty itself. In the sweltering heat of a Syrian workshop around 50 BCE, a glassworker dipped his iron pipe into molten silica and did something radical. He blew. With this single breath, the Roman glassblowing pipe shattered centuries of glassmaking tradition, turning an elite luxury into something even street vendors could afford. Picture the astonishment as craftsmen discovered they could inflate a glowing orb of liquid glass like a bubble, then shape it into cups, bowls, or even delicate window panes with nothing but gravity and deft twists of the wrist. This wasn't just a new technique, it was alchemy in reverse, transforming sand into transparency at a pace 10 times faster than older core-forming methods. Suddenly, glassware flooded Roman markets, perfume bottles for Pompeii's merchants, drinking vessels for taverns, and even early greenhouses that let Emperor Tiberius grow cucumbers year-round. The pipe's genius lay in its democratic simplicity. Unlike Egyptian glassmakers who painstakingly wound threads around clay cores, or Mesopotamian artisans casting glass in molds, a single Roman glassblower could produce dozens of identical vessels in a day. Archaeologists have found glass factories from Cologne to Carthage, churning out everything from surgical tools to mosaic tiles. Their output so ubiquitous that shipwrecks from the era often contain hundreds of stacked beakers destined for provincial towns. But the real revolution was in architecture. For the first time, glass windows, once unimaginable outside temples or palaces, began appearing in middle-class villas, their uneven panes diffusing sunlight into a warm glow that redefined indoor spaces. Yet by the 4th century, this flourishing industry withered. The reasons were as layered as the glass itself. Barbarian invasions disrupted trade routes for soda ash, a key ingredient. Christian asceticism discouraged lavish glassware, and lead shortages crippled production of the clear glass Rome had perfected. Most crucially, the intricate supply chains supporting glassblowing from Spanish sand to Syrian natron collapsed with the empire's fragmentation. For centuries, window glass became a rarity again, its knowledge preserved only in monastic workshops until Venice's Renaissance glassblowers revived it. Now let's turn from the fragility of glass to something far more enduring, a tool that didn't just reflect light, but charted the paths of continents. Because while glassblowing shaped daily life, our final invention guided explorers past the edge of the known world, one trembling needle at a time. The vast Pacific stretches like an endless blue desert, its currents and winds whispering secrets only the Polynesian double-hulled canoe could decipher. Picture these majestic vessels, some longer than Olympic swimming pools, gliding across thousands of miles of open ocean with nothing but the stars and swells as guides. Unlike European ships that hugged coastlines in fear of the unknown, these twin-hulled marvels carried entire families, their decks stacked with breadfruit seedlings, taro roots, and even domesticated pigs and chickens. This wasn't just transportation, it was a floating ecosystem, a self-sufficient ark designed to colonize new islands with everything needed to rebuild civilization from scratch. What set these canoes apart wasn't just their size, but their revolutionary engineering. By lashing two narrow hulls together with flexible crossbeams, Polynesian navigators achieved stability no single hull ship could match. The design sliced through waves rather than battling them, allowing speeds up to 15 knots faster than many European ships of the same era. Modern sailors would recognize the principles. The same aerodynamics that powered Polynesian voyagers now define high-performance catamarans. Yet the real genius lay in the details. Adjustable crab-claw sails could pivot to catch the slightest breeze, while leaf-shaped paddles doubled as rudders. Watertight compartments prevented flooding, and hulls were coated with coconut oil to repel barnacles. This wasn't just boat building, it was oceanic mastery refined over generations. Why then do history books glorify the Santa Maria while these Pacific giants fade into footnotes? The answer lies in what they represented. European ships carried conquerors, Polynesian canoes carried communities. Where Columbus's voyage sought extraction, Polynesian expansions embodied reciprocity. Each new island was carefully stewarded, its resources balanced against need. The canoe's legacy isn't just in its hulls, but in its philosophy, that exploration need not mean exploitation. Today, as traditional wayfinding experiences a revival, these forgotten vessels are finally reclaiming their place as one of humanity's greatest maritime achievements, not for the lands they claimed, but for the futures they planted. Progress isn't a straight line, it's more like a winding river, sometimes surging forward, other times looping back on itself. The disappearance of these 38 tools isn't just about forgotten objects, it's a mirror reflecting how easily the threads of innovation can unravel. Take the Roman Hypocaust, for example. This marvel of central heating didn't fail because it didn't work. It vanished because the empire that maintained its vast network of furnaces and aqueducts crumbled. Without legions of engineers to tend the system, without the trade routes that delivered fuel, the Hypocaust became a relic. The same fate befell the Greek fire Siphon, its secret so closely guarded that when the last keeper died, the formula turned to myth. Technology, it turns out, is only as durable as the society that nurtures it, but conquest wasn't always the culprit. Sometimes progress itself left brilliant tools obsolete. The Macedonian Sarissa, once the terror of battlefields, became a liability when Rome's flexible legions outmaneuvered its rigid formations. The Viking Sunstone, a celestial GPS carved from crystal, faded into legend when magnetic compasses offered simpler navigation. Even the Polynesian stick chart, a masterpiece of environmental intuition, couldn't compete with the precision of printed maps. These tools didn't fail, they were outpaced. Yet here's the twist, many weren't truly surpassed for centuries. The Babylonian seed drill, lost for millennia, wasn't improved upon until the 18th century. The Antikythera Mechanism's astronomical calculations wouldn't be matched until the Renaissance. Their disappearance wasn't just a loss, it was a delay in human potential. Then there's the quiet tragedy of knowledge hoarding. The Hittites' ironworking techniques, so fiercely protected, evaporated with their empire because the guilds that held the secrets were too exclusive. Contrast that with the Roman Groma, a tool so simple and widely taught that its principles endured even as Rome fell. The lesson, innovation thrives when shared, withers when walled away. And let's not forget the role of cultural shifts. The backstrap loom's intricate patterns were banned as idolatry. The Mayan bark paper burned as heresy. When new rulers dismiss old ways as primitive, entire systems of knowledge can vanish in a generation. What does this mean for us today? These tools whisper a warning: no invention, no matter how brilliant, is permanent. The same forces that erased them, disruption, secrecy, short-sightedness, still shape our world. Silicon Valley servers could crumble like Roman roads. Proprietary algorithms might become as indecipherable as Greek fire. But there's hope too. Just as archaeologists piece together lost technologies from fragments, we're learning to preserve knowledge more democratically. Open-source designs, digital archives, and collaborative science are our modern-day clay tablets, ensuring that the next great idea doesn't fade into silence. The true legacy of these tools isn't just what they achieved, it's the reminder that progress is a flame we must all tend together. From the Roman Groma's precise lines to the Polynesian canoe's ocean-spanning grace, these 38 tools were the unsung architects of civilization. They didn't just exist in the background, they were the background, the invisible framework that allowed empires to rise, thrive, and sometimes crumble. Think about that for a moment: the sickle that fed armies, the chisel that carved cities, the astrolabe that guided explorers. None of them demanded glory, yet without them, history would have unfolded in entirely different ways. What's fascinating isn't just their individual brilliance, but the patterns they reveal about innovation itself. Some, like the Greek crane or the Chinese dragon bone pump, were triumphs of collective problem-solving, tools so effective they spread across continents. Others, like the Ulfbert sword or Greek fire, were so advanced that their secrets died with their makers, leaving us to wonder how much knowledge has slipped through time's cracks. And then there are those like the Mesopotamian brick mold, whose real innovation wasn't the tool itself, but the idea behind it: standardization, a concept so fundamental we barely notice it today. Here's the real question these tools leave us with: how many other breakthroughs have we forgotten? For every Antikythera mechanism that survives by chance, how many others were lost to war, decay, or sheer neglect? The lesson isn't just about rediscovering the past, it's about recognizing the fragility of progress. The backstrap loom's intricate patterns, the Shaduff's elegant hydraulics, the Quipu's knotted calculus, they all remind us that human ingenuity takes countless forms, many of which don't fit neatly into the stories we usually tell. So the next time you flip a light switch or check your phone's GPS, take a second to trace the lineage. That electricity, it owes a debt to the Hypocaust's understanding of heat transfer. That navigation app, it's the great-great-grandchild of Polynesian star compasses and Viking sunstones. History isn't a parade of lone geniuses, it's a collaboration across millennia, with ideas passing from hand to hand, culture to culture, even when the names and faces fade away. If this journey through forgotten tools has sparked your curiosity, you're not alone. The comment section below is full of fellow time travelers. Maybe you've got a theory about how Roman concrete could revolutionize modern construction, or you're amazed by the Inca's knotted accounting system. Drop your favorite discovery from this list, or tell us about another obscure tool that deserves its moment in the spotlight. And if you're hungry for more stories of hidden history, hit that subscribe button. We've only scratched the surface. Because the past isn't just a list of dates and battles, it's a treasure hunt, and every unearthed tool is another clue to understanding who we are.